Hello, everyone. This is Penny Hill. I am the head of education here at TIPCO, and I'm really excited this topic today is super exciting, and I'm joined with two amazing people that know everything about this topic. First is Nelson Petrocek. He's our global CTO for TIPCO. Hey, Nelson.
Hello.
And then there's Dave Nielsen. He is the Senior Director for Developer and Community Relations at Harness. Hey, Dave. Oh, if you could turn yourself off mute.
That would help.
Yeah. There we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Hey, thanks. So let's kick off this subject straight on. So DevOps, it's been here since, I think back in 2007, so 15 years, people saw the value of having, a very continuous product development environment and everything like that. We now then let's take analytics. We saw people taking products and services, embedding some really smart analytics in there. But we've now just started seeing where IT operations and stuff are getting smarter. We're seeing people trying to dabble kind of into analytics and seeing what they can do to kind of like identify problems, root cause analysis, all those things, false alarms, you name it, right? So let's talk about this. What have you seen in the world of DevOps in general? And we'll start with you, Nelson. And what are you seeing people starting to look at to solve in the way of analytics?
Oh yeah, let me start with a couple different things that I know we'll have Dave add on to this. But definitely bringing those two topics together is something that we've seen a lot of interest in recently. So people have been looking at CI/CD pipelines, and there's different tools for supporting this. There's hyperscalers have some tools around this. There's obviously various open source tools, but we're seeing another set of capabilities starting to emerge that is incorporating analytics into an overall CI/CD process, and even elements of data that organizations are collected, after something gets rolled out to production. So they're using some of the observability capabilities that are being introduced when, for services or other capabilities that are rolled into production, taking all that information and kind of bringing that forward, if you will, into the CI/CD process in order to make that part of the process better. And so now you're getting this convergence. So, instead of treating them as two separate entities, if you will, you do your automated kind of deployment steps and you get this thing built and you get this thing rolled out to production and you throw it over the fence and somebody else is monitoring it. That information is now starting to get pulled back into a CI/CD pipeline. So it's that blending of analytics and DevOps, if you will, that we're really starting to see and get more and more organizations are getting an interest in it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. What about you, Dave? What are you seeing out there? Are you seeing similar?
Well, I was just going to, if you don't mind, I was going to just tell a little bit of a historical story to kind of give us some perspective on,
sure,
where we are compared to where we were a while ago. A long time ago, I doubt anybody on this call or on this stream will remember, but a long time ago, I led up a group of people organizing events around cloud computing. It was called Cloud Camp. And we started back in 2008. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. And about that time was when I was realizing, wow, cloud computing seems to be interesting to entrepreneurs and developers, but it doesn't seem to be that interesting to the operations folks. And I really didn't understand why. And I was coming from a developer background, so I didn't have that experience. But as a part of our Cloud Camp series of events that we were organizing, which was a grassroots organization, like not funded by any company. It was all individual volunteers around the world organizing cloud camps. We ended up running 375 of these small conferences in over 100 cities around the world. It was quite a phenomenon at the time. But John Willis was part of that group, that early group who was early adopters of cloud computing, and he at the time had already had like 17 years of experience back in the IT world, and we were talking about like why are the IT folks really not coming to these cloud events, and he explained that it's like, well, for them it doesn't seem that new. They already know about virtualization, and they a lot of these things they already know about, so it doesn't seem as new to them, and eventually he thought that it would start to make more sense. But for them to come. But we decided we'd create an event specifically for them, specifically for the ops folks to learn about cloud computing. So we called it Ops Camp, and in some ways, it was sort of a predecessor to DevOps days, which, Patrick Dubois and those folks, Andrew Schaefer, and John Willis sort of helped evangelize. But the story I want to tell you is that for me, showing up to these events, which were unconferences, meaning that the attendees could propose their own topics, it was fascinating to watch them propose the topics and then try to lump them into categories so I could understand what they cared about. And what they typically would bucket the topics into would be like set up and configure. I mean, these are things I named them, coming from the outside, but set up and configure your systems. That seemed to be like a bucket of things. And then monitor and maintain those systems. That seemed to be a bucket of things. And then and this first one that we ran was in Austin. And the third category was, man, our jobs suck. Sorry for the language, but like they really didn't like some of the situations that they were finding themselves in. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That was a significant portion of the event, maybe like a 25% of the topics. Then we went into Boston, and it was very similar, almost identical as far as the categories go. And then finally, our third event was in San Francisco, and things got different. Again, think of the timing. This is like around 2009-ish, I think. And all the first two categories were the same. The third category, instead of like, wow, things aren't that great, was, pounding my chest. I just deployed 500 servers this morning. It was very, very different. And I was like, whoa, what is going on here, right? And of course, what had happened is, this is back in the social media times, like people were really starting to scale with the social media. They needed to be able to rapidly deploy servers. And the person I'm talking about actually came from a financial institution. He was over at Charles Schwab, I think, and or E-Trade, one of the two. But they were rapidly like growing, expanding. That really caught me. And so, perspective-wise, here we are, like 14 years later, 13 years later, and we've gone from that's being brand new, and only the cutting-edge companies are on top of it, to that's becoming and has become, I would say, like, part of your job, and automating and infrastructure as code, all that kind of thing. So my point being is that it's taken a while, but these kind of systems do take time to change. But I think we're now to the point where we have all those APIs. There's now companies out there that are offering platforms that give you the IT version of what like Heroku was back then. So the CI/CD platforms, and that's what I noticed back then. I'm like, wow, if these APIs come into fruition, IT is going to basically build their own Heroku. Right, like that's what's going to happen, and that's what's happening, and that's what I see now is we now have these platforms that can do CI, CD, and everything else that you need. Even like at Harness, we have the ability to monitor the URL so that if a service that you've deployed is not being used, you can set a timeout on it, and we'll actually shut it down for you, so you can save money. Because as Amazon recently said, like 40% of all of their servers are not being used, like they're just over provisioned, or just. Yeah. They're doing nothing. So we've come so far. And so what I see now is, like everything seems to have an API now. Everything has some sort of analytics. They're not necessarily all stitched together nicely yet, but we're seeing that. We're certainly trying to do that at Harness. We've got a whole bunch of services that we can pull in. We can talk more about what I see as far as like all the different services, but that's what I'm seeing is like now, wow, what's different? What's different now is we have enough of these APIs and access to them to be able to pull them in and start to stitch together kind of a visual diagram of like what is happening and how can we improve it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So interesting enough when you said, back then, oh, my job, because in general, DevOps maybe is not the most glorious job in the world, right? And part of our title is Supercharge DevOps with analytics, because analytics is that shiny object, right? That people like. So if somebody was kind of starting out here and they've been in DevOps for 15 years or stuff, and they understand that analytics will bring a whole new level to this, what are some of the types of analytics that they can look at to really jumpstart that? And maybe how does it work in with, the tools they have today with APIs and stuff like that. So what are you seeing there? Maybe Nelson is like, what kind of analytics really? Where are we getting at? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think There's going to be a few different areas here. So one is, as Dave mentioned, around optimization of your resources, which then translates into costs. So there is that element of being able to understand, and a lot of this just comes from, again, historical data and then the monitoring data that you're collecting from services and things like that. But there's the combination of the two. You can use analytics to, in some ways, monitor, in some ways predict, if you will, even just derive greater insights in terms of how you're using expensive compute resources, and optimizing that part of the process. There's analytics, I think, that you could use also, and is being used for things like test optimization. So how do you optimize the tests that you're running as part of an overall CI/CD pipeline? Things like security. So if I am looking at kind of monitoring all the security scanning processes, let's say, that are part of the CI/CD pipeline, and I'm gathering all the logs from those scans, are there certain patterns that I can start to detect from those logs based on the types of deployments that I'm doing or the types of changes that I'm making to my code? Or so these would be some examples. I'll start with those.
Right.
I gave three. I'll start with those three. But those would be three examples of where analytics can really augment an existing DevOps or CI/CD process.
And they sound like they're not even that difficult in sense. It's a piece that you can look for patterns, you can look for this, and there's so many analytics out there that enable you to do that, right, Dave? Like you would see that there's very stuff back then there wasn't. Now there is.
Oh yeah, there's, I mean, ton more. I think there may have always been somebody somewhere writing a Perl script that grabbed data and gave you some access to something, but it's hard to do all of that when you're on your own. There's only so much you can do. And, it probably started in the open source world with people sharing those scripts and just like, hey, I'll improve this, right? And then, Bob or Jane had their file on their hard drive that they used. They just emailed it to somewhere or put it on a shared drive, but now we've got Git and we've got the ability to share this stuff much more. And then, I'll bet you that I don't have data on this, but I'll bet you a lot of the big startups today started like that. They had some script or something that they were using and saw, wow, this is really valuable. I'm going to turn this into a service, just like Git took, or GitHub took Git and turn that into a service. So a lot has changed and a lot more access there than we've had. But it feels to me strange that one of the most valuable features I felt Heroku offered. By the way, I think personally, Heroku is the most influential piece of technology in the cloud ever, just simply because if you go back to when it first started, it was light years ahead of everyone else. And everyone, look at the big open source platform as a service companies out there, with, whether it's like a Pivotal Cloud Foundry or OpenShift. Those started basically saying, how can we do open source Heroku for the enterprise? That's literally how they started. And so, but Heroku offered the ability to shut down, monitor your services, identify which ones weren't being used, and shut that out 10 years ago. And that's only now making it. So yeah, there's those services are out there and finally coming together into a platform. I was just going to comment. So some of the ones you mentioned, Nelson, were the cloud costs, security testing, and we got companies out there like Sneak, right? And what they're doing is they're analyzing those Git repos. So a lot of what has happened really is the adoption of Git by IT. A lot of what we now are able to do is done because of the massive adoption of Git or GitHub, GitLab. All these companies have these platforms. And then the last thing I'll mention is in CI. You also mentioned that. So we call it test intelligence, but it's the same thing, where you analyze what are the tests you're running. Well, does it make sense to run all of those tests if you only made changes to one file? Maybe what we do is we analyze the code and say, well, you made changes to this file or these set of files, and those are covered by these tests. So we'll run those tests. And we use machine learning to actually identify that. What code has changed, what tests ran that had any impact, and we'll identify over time, here are the tests that need to be run when those files are changed or those services are changed. And so, that's one area I was going to add to your comment, Nelson, that, machine learning is giving us a lot of ability to add value to these tests or other data analytics along the way.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, I summarize it around, is that the analytics can really bring some predictions, some preventative, some insights, and really help you to really advance and help with outages and help with all that kind of stuff. So you really can get to, I would say, the next level of DevOps, right? Really building yourself in, which is where we are, right? This is where we are. This is the time to do it. Well, we're running out of time. There's so many more topics. I wanted really to get into the DevOps versus DataOps, but we'll leave that for another one and really see what that, because there's so much confusion about what's DataOps, what's analytics. So speaking of analytics, we've got a great conference that's free, TIPCO. It's our analytics forum. It's June 13th through June 15th. Again, free. You'll hear from all different people on all different types of analytics, on predictive modeling, on all this stuff from different industries and stuff like that. So I encourage you guys to attend that. And for that, we've just got a quick video that we're going to show with some really sneak preview of one of the speakers there. So before we go there, I just want to thank Nelson, thank Dave for just a fascinating conversation. And it's been an honor for me to moderate it. So
thank you. I was just going to mention one thing, and as we go here, I don't feel like we can have this conversation without mentioning Dora and the analytics that you can get from kind of monitoring your own organizational analytics. Just go take a look at the Dora report, and you can learn more about that. I think there's a lot of valuable information there around measuring your speed of delivery and change and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Hey there, all you visual analytics enthusiasts. I'm super excited about the 2022 TIBCO Analytics Forum, especially our first keynote speaker, Nadi Bremer. Nadi's a visualization artist. She's an astronomer, a data scientist, and a data viz specialist. She's created visual analytics and art for Google, Sony Music, UNICEF, New York Times, and recently published a best-selling book, Data Sketches, in 2021. Hey, Nadi, great to have you.
Hi, Michael. I'm really excited to be part of TAF 22.
Cool. Hey, can you show our listeners some of your favorite work real quick?
Yes, of course. It's all captured on my website, which you can see here. I have work, I have a blog, which I share all of the things that I think would be interesting for others. I have an art section, but in terms of my favorite work that I want to share, and I'll share more during our presentation at TAF, is this one that I did together with Sony Music, where I reimagined the golden record, but in terms of data. So if we had the streaming data from Spotify, from YouTube, and the actual playlists, the music itself in a way, and it's all sort of combined in this poster. And then I turned that into a system so it creates kind of like a musical, unique fingerprint for every song that they basically have data for.
That is super cool. So you can see that and a lot of Nadi's other projects, data viz, data art. We're even going to get into NFTs and all the rest. So looking forward to you folks joining Nadi and I for a keynote at TIBCO Analytics Forum 2022, June 13th to the 15th. Bye for now.